Daron stood at the edge of the temple, the jungle stretching endlessly before him. The suns were just rising, spilling golden light over the leaves and broken stones. The air smelled of wet earth and renewal. He could hear the faint hum of engines in the distance. His squad was coming, and with them, the orders, the rules. The world he had left behind. Soraya stood beside the altar, the crystal safe in her hands. Her golden eyes met his, steady and fierce, yet soft with a quiet understanding. For hours they had watched the sunrise together in silence. Two enemies bound by an unspoken trust that had grown stronger than any weapon or command. "You could leave now," she said, her voice calm, though her tail flicked nervously. "Take the crystal. Return to your people. They will celebrate you." Daron shook his head. "I can't," he said softly. "Not after everything I've seen. Not after everything you've shown me." "Then what will you do?" He took a deep breath, feeling the weight of every choice he had ever made. The orders, the missions, the lives he had taken and lost, they all pressed against him like a mountain. But now, standing in the light of a new day, he felt a clarity he had never known. "I'll walk away," he said. "Leave this place in your hands. Let your people live. Let history remember it as it should, not how my side wants it to be." Soraya's eyes widened slightly, and for the first time, a small, almost imperceptible smile touched her lips. "You are human," she said softly. "You carry both mercy and madness in your hands. Few of your kind could choose as you have." Daron looked at her, feeling a mixture of exhaustion and peace. "I don't know if that makes me brave or foolish," he admitted, "but I do know it feels right." She studied him for a moment, then stepped closer, her wounded leg steady now, with the bandage holding firm. Her claws brushed lightly against his arm, not threatening but grounding him. "If humans are all like you," she said, "perhaps there is hope for our worlds after all." He smiled faintly. "We're not all like me," he said, "but maybe some of us can be." The engines grew louder in the distance, but he did not move toward them. He did not call them. He simply turned, his boots crunching softly against the temple floor. Stepping carefully through the ruins he had come to respect and protect. Every broken pillar, every carved symbol, every shadow seemed to watch him. Silent witnesses to his choice, Soraya followed him to the doorway, her eyes never leaving his. Her tail flicked once, a silent warning, and then curled around her leg as she stepped back. "Go," she said simply. He nodded, stepping out into the jungle. The sunlight touched his face, warm and gentle, and for the first time in months, he felt alive without the weight of orders pressing on his shoulders. He walked slowly, listening to the jungle's morning chorus, the birds, the wind, the distant roar of waterfalls. He did not look back. Not yet, but he could feel her presence, strong and steadfast, guarding the crystal and her people. It was enough. Hours later, he reached the top of a small hill, overlooking the jungle and the mountains beyond. He paused, taking in the sight, the world alive again. The ruins behind him, silent but safe, and a future that was no longer dictated by war or fear. Somewhere in the distance, he imagined Soraya standing guard, her golden eyes bright with determination. She had been his enemy, his threat, his challenge. But she had also become his teacher, showing him something more important than victory or survival: mercy, trust, and hope. Daron finally spoke aloud, though no one could hear him. "I'll tell them nothing," he said softly. "Not yet. Maybe never. This story, it belongs to you." And with that, he continued walking, deeper into the jungle, leaving behind the ruins, the storm, and the crystal in the hands of the one he once called enemy. But in leaving, he carried something far greater, a piece of his own humanity, renewed and unbroken. Soraya watched him go, her tail flicking gently, her ears alert. She could have stopped him at any moment, could have struck him down as any warrior would. But she didn't, because sometimes the greatest strength was not in the claws, the teeth, or the weapons. It was in the heart of the one who chooses mercy over destruction. Daron disappeared into the jungle, a human who had learned that bravery was not just about fighting, it was about choosing what was right. When no one else could see it, And in that choice, the galaxy shifted ever so slightly, reminding all who dared to watch that humanity could shine brighter than any weapon. The ruins stood behind him, silent but alive with memory. The crystal glowed softly in Soraya's hands, a symbol of survival and trust. And somewhere deep in the jungle, a human soldier walked free, carrying hope as his shield. The adventure was over. But the story of mercy, courage, and the bond between human and feller had only just begun. The days passed slowly after that night of rain. The forest outside Evan's shelter glowed faintly under the strange twin moons, and the ruins whispered with old memories. Inside, life began to return, softly, carefully. Like a flower pushing through cracks in stone, Lyra healed faster than Evan expected. Her leg was still weak, but she could stand now, limping only slightly. She spent most mornings sitting by the door watching the mist roll across the ruins. Sometimes she said nothing for hours. Her tail would sway lazily, and her ears would twitch at distant sounds. Evan had gotten used to her silence. It didn't feel cold anymore. It felt like quiet company. He often worked on repairing scavenged drones, while Lyra sat nearby, her sharp eyes following every movement. One afternoon, he noticed her frowning at the pieces he laid out. "You're doing it wrong," she said suddenly. Evan blinked. "Excuse me?" She pointed with a clawed finger. "The coil goes there. You'll burn the whole thing if you connect it like that." Kaven laughed softly. "Oh, so now the forest cat's an engineer?" She crossed her arms, her ears twitching in annoyance. "I watched the soldiers fix their tech before they attacked my village. I remember things." Evan's smile faded a little. "Your village." Her gaze turned distant. "Gone. Humans burned it. Said we were dangerous?" Her voice cracked at the last word, but she quickly hid it, turning away. "They left me for dead." Evan wanted to say anything, but no words felt right. So he just nodded and said quietly, "Then I'm glad I found you." For a while, she didn't speak. But later, when he went to cook, she joined him. She sniffed suspiciously at the pot of stew, then wrinkled her nose. "Smells strange." "That's human food," Evan said, stirring. "Not everything can be raw meat, you know?" Lyra smirked a little. "You'd starve in the wild," he grinned back. "Maybe, but I'd at least die full." She laughed, then a soft, sudden sound that filled the small shelter like sunlight breaking through clouds. Evan couldn't help smiling wider. From that day, the silence between them began to change. It was no longer heavy with fear. It was alive, full of small exchanges, quiet jokes, and curious questions. Lyra started asking about Earth, the place humans had come from. Evan told her stories about oceans so wide they swallowed the horizon. Cities that touched the sky and rain that smelled like iron and salt. Sounds. "Lonely," she said once. He looked at her, surprised. "Lonely?" She nodded. "All that space? All those people, and you left it behind?" "Why?" Evan stared into the fire. "Because people forgot how to care. They fought over everything: land, power, survival. I thought maybe out here things would be different, were they?" She asked softly. He shook his head. "No, not until you." Lyra looked away quickly, pretending to clean her claws, but he saw the small blush that colored her cheeks in return. She began to share her own world, the one before it was destroyed. She told him about the high forests where her people hunted under silver leaves, the festivals where they sang under starlight, and the quiet prayers they offered to the moons. Evan listened to every word, imagining it all. Her voice carried both pride and sadness, and sometimes, when she spoke of the past, her tail would wrap around her like she was holding herself together at night. They would sit by the fire, listening to the hum of the ruined city in the distance. Lyra would curl up near the door, her tail flicking softly, while Evan scribbled notes in his old journal. One night, as the fire burned low, she spoke again. "You're strange, Evan." He looked up from his book. "How so?" "You don't act like the others. You don't talk about killing or capturing. You fix things. You. Listen." He smiled gently. "Maybe because I broke too many things before." She tilted her head, studying him. Then, slowly, she said, "Maybe you're not broken anymore." Those words hit deeper than she knew. Evan didn't reply. He just smiled faintly, his eyes soft with something he hadn't felt in years. Hope, from then on, they worked together. She helped him repair the solar units and taught him how to move quietly through the forest without leaving tracks. In return, he taught her human words she didn't know, how to read simple books, how to fix old tools. Sometimes she'd tease him, flicking her tail across his arm when he got something wrong. Too slow, human, she'd laugh. And sometimes, when she thought he wasn't looking, she'd glance at him with an expression that wasn't just curiosity, it was trust. By the third week, the small shelter no longer felt empty. It felt alive with laughter, stories, and something unspoken growing between them. Neither of them said it out loud, but both could feel it, this fragile bond forming, quietly in the ruins of a broken world, and for the first time in a long while. Evan didn't feel like a man running from the past. He felt like someone building a new beginning with a wounded Catgirl who was learning, slowly, how to live again. The peace they had built didn't last long. It never does. Not in a world where kindness was a rare and dangerous thing. It was a calm morning when the sound came deep, distant, and mechanical. At first, Evan thought it was thunder rolling across the hills. But thunder didn't hum like engines. Thunder didn't shake the ground beneath your feet. Lyra was the first to react. Her ears twitched sharply, and her tail went stiff. She froze, staring toward the forest. "Engines," she whispered, voice trembling. "Human patrol." Evan's stomach sank. He ran to the small window slit in the wall and peered out. 3 armored bikes were cutting through the mist, the riders dressed in black combat suits. The symbol of the human command burned red on their chests. They were scanning the ruins, looking for something. Or someone. "They must have tracked the power readings," Evan muttered. He had repaired too many machines lately, and the energy signature must have reached them. Lyra's claws dug into the table. "They'll kill me if they see me." Evan turned to her immediately. "Hide. Now." "Where?" she asked, eyes wide and panicked. He rushed to the corner of the shelter and pulled up a loose metal plate from the floor. Beneath it was a narrow space filled with tools and scraps. "Get in. Stay quiet no matter what happens." Lyra hesitated. "You'll fight for me?" Evan met her gaze. "I already did the moment I helped you." For a second, she looked like she wanted to say more, but there was no time. The sound of engines grew louder. She climbed into the hiding space, curling her tail close to her body. Evan lowered the panel back into place and scattered a few old cloths over it to hide the seams. A sharp knock hit the door. Evan took a deep breath and opened it. The 3 soldiers stood outside, visors reflecting the pale sunlight. The leader stepped forward, scanning him from head to toe. "Name," the soldier barked. "Evan Ward," he replied calmly. "Purpose of stay?" "Scavenging. I live alone. The city's full of scrap worth selling." The soldier looked past him into the shelter. "We've detected non-human biosigns in this sector. You seen any of the locals?" Evan's heart pounded, but his face stayed neutral. "Locals? You mean the ferals?" "Haven't seen any for months." "Place is dead." The man stepped inside without asking. His boots thudded against the metal floor. He began inspecting everything: the workbench, the cot, the shelves. The other 2 followed, rifles ready. Evan tried to keep his voice steady. "If I'd seen one, I'd have reported it." "I don't want trouble," the soldier grunted. He walked over to the small table and noticed 2 bowls, one recently washed, one not. He stared at them for a long second. Evan's throat went dry. "You eat a lot for one man," the soldier said slowly. Evan forced a tired laugh. "You think I can't enjoy 2 meals?" "I work hard." The soldier didn't smile. His gaze flicked toward the floor. Evan's chest tightened. Just one wrong glance, one wrong sound from below. Everything would be over. Finally, after a tense silence, the soldier turned away. "Let's move. Nothing here but rust." They left as quickly as they came. Engines roaring back into the distance. Evan closed the door and leaned against it, his legs shaking. When the sound finally faded, he lifted the floor panel. Lyra was still there, her golden eyes wide and wet. She climbed out slowly, her body trembling. "You lied for me?" she whispered. He gave a shaky smile. "I told you, I don't turn my back on friends." She stared at him for a long moment, her lip trembling. Then, without warning, she stepped forward and pressed her forehead against his chest, a gesture of her kind. A silent bond. "Don't do that again," she whispered. "Don't risk yourself for me." He gently touched the top of her head. "Too late for that, Lyra." She pulled back, eyes glistening with something between fear and gratitude. "You're a fool," she said softly. "Probably," he replied with a small laugh, "but you're stuck with me now." Outside, the engines faded into the far horizon, but the silence that followed was different. He could still feel the weight of danger pressing against them. For a long while, neither of them spoke. They just stood there, side by side, listening to the wind move through the broken city. The world had shown its cruelty again. But something stronger had risen in its place, trust. And in that fragile moment, under the gray light of the dying sun, Evan realized something simple, yet powerful. He wasn't protecting Lyra out of pity anymore. He was doing it because he couldn't imagine the world without her in it. After the soldiers left, silence returned to the ruined forest. But it was no longer the calm kind. It was the kind that made your heart beat faster, that whispered danger, even when everything seemed still. Evan and Lyra both knew it. Their peace was broken. For the next few days, they lived like shadows. Evan stopped using his power tools and switched off the lights at night. Even the smallest noise could give them away. He started storing food underground, keeping everything hidden. Lyra, with her sharp senses, kept watch from the roof of the shelter, her golden eyes glowing faintly in the dark. One night, as they sat by a small fire inside the shelter, Lyra spoke quietly. "You could still leave me, you know. Go to the human towns. They won't follow you there." Evan didn't look up. He stirred the pot of soup slowly, the wooden spoon scraping the metal edge. "And what about you?" She hesitated. "I'd manage." He finally looked at her. "You're lying." Her ears drooped slightly. "Maybe." She stared into the fire. "You shouldn't risk everything for me. Your people will kill you if they find out." Evan smiled weakly. "Then it's a good thing I stopped calling them my people a long time ago." Lyra looked up at him, her eyes full of something soft, something that almost hurt to see. "You really mean that?" He nodded. "When I helped you, I stopped being on their side. Maybe I never truly was." She didn't reply. Instead, she leaned closer to the fire, her tail brushing his knee. The touch was light, almost accidental, but it made his chest tighten. Over the next few weeks, their lives settled into a rhythm again, different this time, but stronger. When Evan went scavenging, Lyra always followed. She moved quietly beside him, barefoot and graceful, her eyes scanning the shadows. Sometimes she'd vanish into the trees, returning with fruit or wild herbs. Other times, she'd walk so close, he could hear her soft breathing. Once, when they found a half-buried machine, Lyra crouched beside him, curious. "What is it?" she asked, brushing off the dirt. "Old mining drone," Evan said, checking its circuits. "Humans used them before they started destroying everything." She tilted her head. "Why destroy what you build?" He chuckled softly. "That's the big question about us, isn't it?" Lyra frowned. "Your kind scares me sometimes. You can make beautiful things and then burn them." Evan didn't answer. He knew she was right. Humans had built whole worlds and ruined them with greed and fear. Later that night, Lyra sat near the door, while Evan cleaned a weapon he rarely used. The moonlight made her fur shimmer faintly. "Evan," she said suddenly, "when I was hiding under the floor, I could hear your heartbeat." He looked up. "Oh, it was fast," she continued. "I thought you were afraid for me." "I was," he admitted softly. "I didn't want to lose you." Lyra looked at him for a long time, her golden eyes glowing in the dim light. "Why?" He hesitated. "Because you remind me that not everything out here is broken." For a moment she didn't speak. Then she smiled, small, warm, genuine smile that made her look less like a creature running from death and more like someone finding her place again. "You say strange things, human," she murmured. "Maybe," he said, smiling back, "but I mean them." From that night on, Lyra refused to sleep far from him. She would curl up near the door, tail wrapped around her legs, always half alert. Sometimes, in the middle of the night, Evan would wake to the sound of her breathing, steady and calm. It comforted him in ways he didn't understand. One evening, a storm rolled over the ruins. Rain crashed against the roof, thunder echoing through the valley. Lyra sat beside him, hugging her knees. She flinched at every loud sound. Evan noticed and moved closer. "You okay?" "I hate storms," she whispered. "They sound like war." Without thinking, he reached out and touched her shoulder. "It's just rain, Lyra. Nothing's going to hurt you here." She looked at his hand for a moment, then placed her own over it. Her claws were cool against his skin, but her touch was gentle. "You protect me even when I don't ask," she said softly. "Why?" "Because someone should," he said. Her eyes shimmered. She didn't speak again, but when she finally leaned her head against his shoulder, he didn't move away. They sat there, side by side, listening to the storm rage outside. When morning came, the world was quiet again. The rain had washed the ruins clean, leaving behind a sharp, fresh scent. Lyra stretched and looked out at the forest. "We survived again," she said softly. Evan smiled. "Yeah, and we will, as long as we stick together." She turned toward him, her tail curling slowly around his arm. "Then I'm not leaving your side," she said. "Not ever." He looked into her golden eyes and saw no fear there, only determination. And though danger still waited somewhere out there, Evan felt something stronger than fear rise in his heart. They were no longer running. They were standing together, and that made all the difference. Days turned into weeks, and the bond between Evan and Lyra grew deeper than either could have imagined. The ruins no longer felt like a dead place, it felt like home. They shared laughter, quiet meals, long nights where they spoke about their worlds. Lyra often told him about the forests before the humans. Came how her people sang to the stars, how their young ran free under moonlight. Evan listened, always in silence. He had no happy stories to tell from his world, only regrets. But peace has a cruel habit of ending when you least expect it. It was early morning when Lyra woke to the faint sound of humming in the distance. Her ears flicked, tail tense. She slipped outside and climbed the broken wall to get a better view. What she saw froze her heart. Dozens of human soldiers were moving through the forest, scanning everything. Drones hovered above them, flashing red lights. Lyra ran back inside, breath quick. "Evan, they're here again, many this time." He jumped up, grabbing his gear. "How many?" "Too many. They're surrounding this whole area." Evan's mind raced. "They must have traced the last drone we scavenged," he muttered bitterly. "We can't stay here." Lyra's claws dug into the table. "Then where do we go?" He grabbed his pack and slung it over his shoulder. "There's an old water tunnel under the ruins. If we move fast, we can reach the southern ridge before they seal the exits." Lyra nodded, fear flickering in her eyes. "Then we run." They ran through broken alleys, over crumbling metal bridges, through the silent bones of a once great city. Behind them, engines roared and boots thundered. The sound of gunfire cracked through the air as the soldiers closed in. "Evan," Lyra cried, pointing ahead. "The tunnel." They reached a half-buried metal grate. Evan tore it open, motioning for her to go first. Lyra slipped inside, her tail vanishing into the dark. He followed, sealing the grate behind them. The tunnel was narrow and wet, filled with the smell of rust and old rainwater. They crawled for what felt like hours. Each echo of boots above made Lyra's heart pound faster. She could hear her own breathing, quick and shallow. Evan reached back, squeezing her hand gently. "Keep moving. Don't stop." Finally, the tunnel opened into a wide cavern where faint sunlight leaked through cracks above. They climbed out, gasping for air. Lyra looked up toward the light. "We made it," she whispered. But Evan shook his head. "Not yet. They'll track us. We need to go further." Before he could move, a sharp whistle cut through the air. A drone dropped from above, blinking red. Evan reacted instantly, raising his rifle and firing. The drone exploded in a flash of sparks, but it was too late. The explosion echoed through the valley like a beacon. "They know where we are," Lyra whispered. Evan turned to her, breathing hard. "Then we make a stand." Lyra's eyes widened. "No, we can still run." "They'll hunt us forever," he said quietly. "We have to stop them here, or they'll never stop coming." She looked at him, trembling. "You'll die." He smiled sadly. "Maybe, but I'd rather die free than hide forever." Lyra shook her head, tears forming. "I won't let you, Lyra." Before he could finish, the forest lit up with red lights. The soldiers had arrived, surrounding the clearing. Orders shouted through coms, weapons raised. Evan pulled Lyra behind an old concrete pillar and whispered, "When I tell you, run to the east ridge. Don't look back." She grabbed his arm, claws digging in. "No, not without you." "Please," he said softly, eyes full of sorrow. "You deserve to live." She stared at him for a long, painful moment. Then she said, voice trembling, "Then so do you." Before he could argue, the first shots were fired. Bullets tore through the air, hitting the ground near them. Evan returned fire, pushing Lyra deeper into cover. Smoke filled the air. She didn't run. She stayed beside him, fighting with claws and fury, protecting him as much as he protected her. The battle was chaos. Shouts, explosions, dust, and blood. At one point, Evan was struck across the shoulder, falling to one knee. Lyra screamed, catching him before he hit the ground. "Evan." "I'm fine," he lied, blood staining his shirt. She looked into his pale face and felt something inside her break. She turned toward the soldiers and let out a wild, furious cry, a sound that shook even the metal ruins around them. The soldiers hesitated for a moment. That was all Evan needed. He fired one last shot at the fuel tank nearby. The explosion lit the sky, the blast threw them both backward. When the smoke cleared, the forest was silent. Lyra slowly opened her eyes. Her ears rang, her body hurt. But she could still feel warmth beside her Evan's hand in hers. She turned to him, voice breaking. "Evan?" He opened his eyes weakly, managed a faint smile. "Still here?" he whispered. Tears rolled down her cheeks. She held his hand tighter, whispering, "You promised we'd survive together." He looked at her and said softly, "We still might." And as the world burned quietly around them, Lyra realized something simple but powerful. She would never let him go again. Not now. Not ever. Weeks passed after the battle, and the forest slowly returned to a quiet rhythm. The ruins were still dangerous, but Evan and Lyra had learned to move like shadows, to sense threats before they arrived. They built a small cabin in the heart of the forest using scraps from the old city and fallen trees. It was simple, but it was theirs. Lyra had grown stronger. Her wounds healed fully, and her agility returned. She hunted small animals, gathered fruits, and kept watch, while Evan repaired machines or scavenged for parts. They had survived the soldiers, survived the chase, and now the forest became their sanctuary. One evening, the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and violet. Evan sat on the cabin porch, mending a broken solar panel. Lyra leaned against the railing beside him, her golden eyes reflecting the fading light. Her tail curled around her knees, flicking occasionally. "You fixed it again," she said quietly. He looked up, smiling faintly. "I learned from the best," he teased, nodding toward her. She smirked, then her expression softened. "You saved me," she said after a pause. "More than once." Evan sighed, brushing dirt from his hands. "We saved each other," he replied simply. She didn't speak immediately. Instead, she reached out, touching his hand with her own, soft and warm. The gesture was simple, but it carried all the words she didn't say: trust, gratitude, and something deeper. "You can never leave now," she whispered. "You belong here, with me." Evan's chest tightened. He had known this moment was coming, yet it still surprised him. "Lyra," he began, but she shook her head gently. "No, she said firmly. You saved my life. You chose me when no one else would. That means something. You don't walk away from that. He looked at her, really looked, and for the first time in years, he felt a sense of peace he had never known. The war, the hunting, the fear, they were behind him. And beside him, in golden eyes and soft fur, was a life worth protecting, worth fighting for. Lyra pressed closer, her tail brushing over his wrist, entwining almost like a silent promise. We stay together, she said. Through everything. Evan smiled, a genuine, soft smile. Together, he repeated, letting the words sink in. They sat in silence, watching the stars appear one by one above the forest canopy. The night was calm, the air cool and crisp, and for the first time Evan felt safe. Not just because danger had passed, but because he wasn't alone. Not ever again. Lyra spoke then, her voice quiet but steady. I used to be afraid of humans. I thought you'd hurt me, leave me, like the others. But you're different. You care, truly care. I do, Evan said simply. And I will for as long as I live. Her ears twitched, and she let out a small, soft laugh. Then you're mine, she said playfully, yet there was no question in her tone. It was a statement, a bond, a promise that neither words nor time could break. The night deepened, and the forest whispered around them. Even the ruins seemed to bow to their presence, offering quiet shelter. Lyra rested her head on his shoulder, and he wrapped an arm around her. Her breathing slowed, steady and calm, and for the first time, Ben allowed himself to believe that happiness was possible even here, in a world that had tried to destroy them both. Days passed into weeks, weeks into months, and their life became a rhythm of survival and companionship. Lyra hunted, Evan scavenged, and they protected each other from the dangers of the world outside. Every night they returned to the cabin, to the warmth of fire and the soft, comforting presence of the other. One night, as a full moon rose over the forest, Lyra whispered, We're stronger together. We survived because we trusted each other. Evan nodded, resting his hand over hers. Yes, and nothing can take that from us. Her tail wrapped around his wrist again, tight and steady. Promise me, she said softly. No matter what comes, we face it together. I promise, he said, without hesitation. In that moment, the ruins, the hunters, the fears of the past, all of it, faded into memory. What remained was the bond they had forged, unbroken and unyielding. In a world that had tried to tear them apart, they had found each other, and that was more powerful than any threat. The night embraced them. The stars shone above like distant witnesses, and the forest around them whispered of life, hope, and new beginnings. Evan looked at Lyra and smiled. We're home, he said. She leaned against him, her golden eyes reflecting the moonlight. Yes, she whispered, and we'll never be apart again. And so, under the silent watch of the stars, the human and the Catgirl made a promise not just of survival, but of belonging, trust, and an unbreakable bond that would carry them through every challenge the world could throw at them. They had fought together, bled together, and now they would live together, forever.